Hello and welcome to the second video version of our Next Week in Gaming articles. Next week is July week 3 and as usual we'll be covering game releases, early access releases, reviews and interviews. So first up on the release schedule next week is The Bug Butcher. This is a game coming out sometime in July, not entirely sure when. It's coming out as a full release. It's being made by developers Awfully Nice Studios. It's a 2D side-scroller, with the main original piece being that your primary plane of shooting is vertically instead of horizontally, but it will still keep that arcade shooter-style gameplay. There's a ton of different weapon power-ups you can pick up. The main reason I picked this game up was mainly because all of the bugs look really cute and you basically spend the entire game blowing them to smithereens and there's blood everywhere. You play Harry, the bug exterminator, and your job is to kill all the bugs and protect the various scientists that look weirdly like cell phones when I watched the game video. So on Tuesday the 14th we've got another release, only this one's an early access one. It's called Nomad Fleet and it's being developed by a solo developer called Autarka. It's another one in those FTL likes, only it's halfway between Into the Stars, which we looked at last week, and FTL, in that it's not quite as low fidelity as the 8-bit style of FTL, but it's not quite the Unreal 4 engine of Into the Stars, it's halfway between. The main original feature of this game is that it's real-time strategy instead. You spend most of your time running away from aliens. You can upgrade your fleet and create more ships in your fleet from mining asteroids and scavenging other ships. It's fully 3D, so you're not just travelling on the horizontal plane, so it adds that little bit of difference to all of those other games we've been playing. So hopefully it can set itself apart from all those other titles. Also next week on Tuesday we have a game called Guild of Dungeoneering. This is being developed by a developer called Gamebrenus and being published by Versus Evil. This is a dungeon crawler, only it's quite pen and paper in art style but also in gameplay. It's closer to the D&D of the board game. Everything is done in sort of like a card draw fashion. So you start off the dungeon with your hero, whether or not he's starting from level 1 or level 10. And the dungeon isn't made yet. You have to build the dungeon with random pieces you're given, and you also drop in monsters and loot based on random cards you draw. The way the difficulty is measured is you have to drop down a certain amount of cards at once. So if you decide that you want to give your guy a piece of loot, you're also going to have to drop down a couple of monster cards in order for him to get that loot in the first place. It's definitely an interesting and original way of approaching the dungeon crawler, and so we were quite interested in how that one turns out. Also this week, releasing in July, we have a game called Absolute Drift, and this is a game being developed by a developer called Fun Selector with a K. This one's a bit of a weird title because it's a drifting sort of top-down racing game with an isometric view, except most of the levels are sort of open world, free roam, that style. Each little area that is free roam, you sort of drive around and you will pick up missions and quests and things like that. And then you'll go into separate events from there. When you complete all of these events and levels, you'll unlock different cars and extra areas to free roam and do more drives around. The general purpose of this game is to make it to the top of this sacred mountain called Absolute Drift. The art style is very much similar to games built on engines like Turbulence, like Marvelous Mistake. It's a very clean, very blocky, but very pretty engine overall. And that one's coming out sometime in July, not entirely sure when, but sometime this month. Releasing from Early Access next week on the 16th of July is a game developed by Stardock, and that's called The Sorcerer King. This is a little bit of a weird one because it's a take on the 4X strategy style games in that sort of medieval, almost high fantasy setting. The difference between this and games like Civilization, Endless Legend, stuff like that, is you don't actually have any particular enemy AI races. Instead, it's just you, and the Sorcerer King is just a bit of an asshole, and he's going to cause a lot of cataclysms, and there's going to be some unscripted events that are going to happen. Basically, the whole game is like an attempt to exterminate you. Everything's working against you, and your whole purpose is to build your little empire and survive. Up to a stage where you can eventually take on the Sorcerer King. There are minor factions, like in a lot of these 4X strategy games, so you can basically take over them, merge them with your stuff. You'll be building plenty of cities, there's lots of things to mine, loads of resources, all that sort of stuff. There's also a massive crafting system so that you can individually upgrade all of your units. Graphically, again, very similar to Torchlight, things like that, in that sort of low fidelity setting, but still looks reasonably quite good. It'll be interesting to see if it does set itself apart from games like Endless Legends, because there are some pretty good games in that genre already, so it kind of has to set itself apart somehow, so we'll be very interested in how that turns out on release. Finally, next week's review title will be Add to Dux Entertainment's Legends of Eisenwald. This is a turn-based strategy game that's been in early access for a very short amount of time. It's a little bit rough around the edges, but it sets itself apart by being a little bit more believable in the medieval nature. It's set in medieval Germany. It doesn't have the high fantasy setting, but it does have a little bit of mythology and superstition here and there to sort of pad out all of the rest. It's got quite a long amount of content, they reckon about 50 hours. Each unit is individually equipable, so every unit could potentially be unique if you wanted it to. And so that's the main way it's setting itself apart from all of the rest. Hopefully we'll enjoy playing it, but we'll let you know that next week. On to what I've been playing this week, and it's mostly been a bit of Kerbal Space Program. Finally managed to get a laboratory around moon orbit, although I managed to forget to put a docking port on the station, so I'll have to rescue Bill and Jebediah at some point. Also played a bit of ARAM in League of Legends, and discovered that Xerath is actually pretty damn cool for ARAM. Did pretty well, although we lost in the end. And I've actually been looking at the Path of Exile expansion that's coming out soon, and maybe we'll do a thoughts article on that. And to finish off, we'd like to know what you've been playing, particularly if it's old or new. Let us know if you've been playing Legends of Eisenwald. I particularly would like to hear a lot of stuff about that, if you've got any tips for me in playing, because it looks like it could take some getting used to. As always, leave them in the comments section below.